Don't be an anonymous investor. Join the stock market social media platform public.com. Invest any amount of money and share with friends and new friends. Discover new opportunities, such as new companies and potential business partners, and useful tools for beginners, and share your experience with friends on public.com. Link in the video description gets you $5 for being a Grid Network viewer. Use the referral code GRIDnet for your free $5 to invest and start investing and networking on public.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Pre-Race. Joe Samriego, along with Matthew Bro, Joshua Birch from Joshua Birch Motorsports Channel, and Kobe Lambeth from the Podium Finish. A big thank you to our Patreon subscribers, calling the show, Mark and Robin, for keeping us on there. You too can invest in the Grid Network through Patreon or buy me a coffee, where you could contribute one time as much as you want, and you can do that towards Grid Network or to any one of us to enjoy a cup of coffee or an energy drink as we cover motorsports all weekend long, just about every weekend this year. I think we're all getting to the point where we're excited for the end of the year to come, and definitely going to be starting us, as Dimas mentions, this is the decider, Valencia MotoGP Grand Prix 2022. And Joshua, I got to say, this is going to be, I think, a very exciting race weekend for MotoGP. The championship, it may not on paper look like it's going to be the closest one, since we do have Pecco Baganaia ahead of Fabio Quartararo by 23 points. For viewers not familiar, 25 points for the winner. Second place gets 20 points. So Joshua, that essentially means Fabio, must-win situation. Last year, we saw here, Pecco Baganaia, part of a Ducati 1-2-3. Fabio Quartararo, 5th place behind Juan Mir in the Suzuki. Is this really Pecco's championship? And Fabio needs a miracle performance and bad luck from Pecco to get it all.
Do you know, when we left Malaysia, I was sort of saying to everyone and myself as well, okay, it now looks like it's Bagnaia's championship, easy, hands down. But we've come here to Valencia, and I've had the unique experience again of commentating on all the practice sessions live, which means what usually happens is I'm in the commentary box watching the sessions. If anything happens dramatic, it all gets edited up together and put out on the race show. So I've had a good experience of being able to commentate on the sessions, talking about the sessions as well, and sort of reading my own narrative, if you will. And we've seen that Fabio Quartararo has had an amazing start to this weekend. Top in practice one, always consistent, pushing it beyond belief. But Pecco Baganaia struggled. He was 17th in the first session, just made it into qualifying 2 as well in both FP2 and FP3. In the combined practice times that determine the running orders. Qualifying 2, off the pace, was 12th at one point, now starts, as you say, on the grid, I think in P9. So it's, P8, one ahead. I forgot about Nakagami's penalty. But it's such a role reversal. And I've just got this feeling, I said it on air as well, that we're going to see a situation where, like it's been this season with champions being crowned off the track in quite a lot of the series we cover, I've got a feeling that Bagnaia is going to drop it, Quartararo is going to finish 3rd, not be champion, and Bagnaia will be celebrating back in the pit lane as well. It just seems to be that type of weekend once again.
Well, that would be something else, because considering how we've seen F1, F2, F3, W Series all decided, it could totally happen. But that's the thing. With this race, in this format, not a playoff format, that's just the way motorsports go. Comment in the chat room from Adam Lemreys. It's a heavyweight bout of MotoGP, Pecco versus Fabio. This is going to be an incredible Grand Prix. I think it's going to be really exciting. This track, a lot of great memories for title deciding races, championship, season finale races. Fabio Quartararo, he drew the first strike, got the higher, better qualifying position, 4th place. Pecco, 8th place, as you mentioned. That penalty for Nakagami, bringing him up. But Marc Marquez, Jorge Martin and Jack Miller, they're all ahead in the front row of Fabio Quartararo. So he has to get around all three of them for that win. He's in a must-win situations. We know two riders, Marquez, Jorge Martin, they want to get their first win of the year. Jack Miller, Thriller Miller, he is not going to make it easy for Quartararo to get around him because it's his teammate that's going for the championship. If Fabio is behind these three after lap one, does he still have a shot at the win of the race?
No. Simple as. No. Quartararo has got to have one of his legendary starts that we've seen him do in the past as well to even have a chance at getting up there. This is a very much a do or die situation for Quartararo tomorrow. He knows exactly what he's got to do. He has to lead in towards, at the end of the first lap, he must be leading. If he's not, it's going to be an uphill battle because Valencia is not the type of track where you can make overtakes. It's a grueling, demanding circuit as well. It's also, it may be Spain, may be very hot with the ambient temperature like 21, 22 degree as well Celsius. That's double that for those of you in America as well with Fahrenheit. But it's the track because the sun doesn't get on it until about Moto 2 race time and it starts to warm up. The track is not going to be as hot as we expect it. That's what we mean when we say it's cold. It's a cold track as well. The ground temperature might say 36 degrees, but actually there's not enough heat baked into the track. It's just the surface is that temperature. And that gets rubbed away with all the rubber. And the rubber stays down, the rubber stays cold. And that's why we see, especially at this circuit, there are 6 back-to-back corners that are left-handers. There's only 3 right-hand corners at this track, if I can tell you. 9 left-hand corners, 5 right-hand corners, and 2 of those right-hand corners you don't even feel. They're just sort of a drift motion as well. So it's a very difficult circumstance that when you come into turns 13, 14, then you go back to turns 1, 2, and 3, they're all on the left side. So when you pick the bike up to go to the right at turn 4, the front could just dip away from you. We saw that this morning in free practice 3 as well. And that's what you've got to be worried about as well on the first lap of the race. And I think that's what everyone's, especially Quartararo, is going to be thinking of. He needs to get ahead before then, get on the brakes early, get some temp into them, and then just cruise around for the rest of the race. He's got to play it smart, but he has so been pushing it this weekend. I've said Quartararo could win the race. I've said Martin could win the race. I've said Marquez could even win the race. It's just going to be a situation where I still think Baganaia is going to get the title. But everyone's also been saying this weekend, Joe, how similar it is to 2006 between Nicky Hayden and Valentino Rossi. Valentino Rossi crashed out of the race and he dropped out of the points paying positions. He did get back on the back and finish, but he was out of the race and out of contention. And that allowed Nicky Hayden to come up from a big points deficit to take the championship. Many people are saying this is exactly what's going to happen tomorrow because Baganaia is a known crasher. He's already had a few problems here this weekend. We saw Zarco go down on a similar Ducati setup that Baganaia is running tomorrow. So it's just all in the works that it could happen. I'm genuinely sort of nervous and excited for what we could see because I think both of them so deserve to win the title. Quartararo for amazing first half of the season, but Baganaia for the second half of the season, well, that was unstoppable. 5 podiums, 4 victories, 1 second in a row. And then we saw a little bit of the old him in Japan when he crashed out, but it's just a nail biter. I think that if this had more eyes on it, many people would be saying it's like Hunt v Lauda. It's that type of situation. The dramatic stuff that's been happening throughout the season as well. It's Hunt v Lauda, but in MotoGP. It's fantastic.
It is fantastic. Like you said, this championship battle, I've been telling folks, this is, I think, the best championship battle out of the 8 series in the grid ranking because you had it. We were on the air. He's 91 points behind. It looks over. Here we are now. And it's still, even though 23 points behind, as you brought up, 2006, that was a phenomenal. The scenes of Nicky Hayden in tears, pure tears of joy after getting the race with the American flag. That was just something else. It was so special. If Fabio Quartararo was to win this championship somehow, whether it is Pecco crashing out and he getting the win, the emotion I think he's going to be displaying, you would think it was his first championship because he had to battle so hard and both riders so worthy of this championship, but only one could do it. One rider that has gotten to this championship before, back in 2020, Juan Mir. This is going to be his last race with Suzuki, and for Suzuki overall, their last race in MotoGP. So far, the only win this year, Alex Rins at Phillips Circuit, holding off Marc Marquez in a thriller race. We see manufacturers come and go, and especially MotoGP, F1, NASCAR, even a bunch of motorsport series. Overall, how would you grade Suzuki's tenure in MotoGP, including the fact that in 2020 they were the champion and they looked like they were about to get the clean sweep?
I think Suzuki is Sylvain Gintoli, who's their test rider, is on BT Sport this weekend, and I think he put it quite perfectly as well, with the fairy tale of coming into the sport, doing something brand new, creating the Suzuki legacy, bringing it back almost from the dead. Because, of course, we had this back in the 80s that Suzuki were brilliant as well. Barry Sheene was on there constantly as well. Great Suzuki racers. Suzuki sort of came back, reinvented themselves. And ever since then, it was always with the aim, we're going to win the titles. We're going to win the titles. We're going to win it. They did it back in 2020. And then they had a pretty off-season 21. 22, it was getting better and better with the new regulations. We thought they were going to stay around. They decided, their management team back in Japan, no, that's it. We're over. We're not going to do any more. It's hurt everybody in the paddock deeply. And I think Suzuki sort of rounded out by saying, the fairy tale was complete at the end of 2020. We've got nothing left to prove. And I quite like the idea that they think they're still going out on top. They're going out as sort of world champions of the past. And I quite like the name of it, but I think everybody agrees we would much rather keep Suzuki on the grid. But we've still got two teams coming up next year. Two teams from Moto2 coming up, making the presence known, of course, in the main MotoGP series to take it from 24 to I think 26 riders next year, which is going to be insane. A lot more factory runners as well. There is, I think somebody told me at one Grand Prix next year, there could be about 28 or 29 premier class riders in one Grand Prix. And just go back, let's see, 5 or 6, 7 years or so, when MotoGP was struggling to get 15 or 16 bikes on the grid. So it sort of ballooned massively as well, MotoGP. But I think Suzuki have stepped away at the right time, because even they've said it feels like this is the end of MotoGP because of the new rules coming in next year for sprint races. They're changing up the formats as well. They're changing the stats as well. They say it's kind of the right time to just sort of break away, and that's enough. I think I've had discussions this weekend as well with several journalists as well, and I put it on a tweet as well. They replied to Simon Patterson. Next year, so many journalists are leaving because they don't want to do the strain of the season. So many team members are leaving because they don't want to spend more time with their family. And many people online, as you know, the great saint that Twitter is as well, they've been saying, well, who needs you? Who needs you? Why do that? Why do you moan? Why do you moan? We love this. It's racing every single weekend. Yeah, because you're sat on your sofa at home watching the sport. You're not traveling to these places. You're not setting up the bikes. You're not doing the sessions. You're not jet lagged, tired, traveling all time after time as well. It's that type of fatigue that is making these big calendars even worse. And Suzuki has sort of said, okay, well, we're not going to do that, because they also say the reason they left is because the calendar's extending. But next year, to round up this very long sort of point, because it's the last race of the season, so everything's sort of been coming up for conversations a lot. Next year is a do or die for MotoGP. Either this sprint format works and it's a great change, or it doesn't work and they need to change it quickly back. Otherwise, MotoGP could be dead. And that's literally what people have been saying, because it's just getting too much. People want an 18-round calendar with normal races, no sprint races, and it's a do or die year next year. So that's a pretty big, bold statement here in Valencia. It feels like the end of an era. And it does feel like you're going from middle school to secondary school, or what would you call it over there in America before you go to high school? What's junior to... Yeah. There you go. You're going up in different years as well. So I don't know. It's got a very weird feeling, this season finale. And of course, on Tuesday, we've got the postseason test, which is going to see all next year's riders on new bikes, some are on old bikes. Marc Marquez is testing the 2024 bike with the biofuel that day. So that's going to be exciting. It's a prototype 2024 biofuel. So there's a lot to look forward to, and it does feel like the end of an era in MotoGP right now. That's the end of my very long point there, Joe.
Yeah, it's something else where MotoGP, I've always told folks, if you're sort of getting burnt out of what people will call NASCAR pursuing more entertainment than sport, try MotoGP. If you're getting tired of Formula One extending your calendar to sprint races, there was MotoGP, and then MotoGP sprint race for every round. It's like that came out of left field for me here in the United States. But one of the big things, it's going to be so different MotoGP, and I think it's going to be really something where A, it doesn't work out, or B, if it does work out, it might change the landscape of motorsports. But for those teams and riders, that's going to be something else. It's going to be really interesting to see what all happens. A couple of comments in the chat room from Dimas. This, of course, the last dance for Suzuki Tech 3 KTM at Valencia. And then a question he has, do you know Marco Bezzecchi crashed and Mooney VR46 bike fire at free practice 3 Valencia Grand Prix? Josh, we saw that. Any thoughts on what happened? And are they 100% after all that?
He's 100%. The team say the bike's going to need to be repaired ahead of warm. They've moved over to bike number 2 for the rest of the weekend. They're repairing the bike over tonight, and they're going to test it in warm up. And if it's okay in warm up, then they might keep it as race bike as well as a backup in case it rains. But from my understanding is that the second bike has now become the primary, and they swapped the setups over. And that's why in qualifying, Bezzecchi was a little bit all over the place to begin with, because he hadn't done a lot of running on that bike as well. They only had 30 minutes in free practice 4 to get it all right before going into qualifying. So that's that. But I do know that Bezzecchi pushed a Marshall with the fire extinguisher to put it out. It sort of really badly shoved him as well. And considering the Marshall nearly tripped and fell into the fire, Bezzecchi has got a £1,000 fine and a couple of very, very, very harsh slaps on the wrist as well for that accident, that decision as well. I think it's right, because you don't push Marshalls over and nearly into a blaze of fire. I mean, if that was me race controlling that, I would have personally banned Bezzecchi from the paddock, because that's attempted murder in my book, because he pushed him. Yes, the adrenaline was high. Yes, he crashed, but he pushed him. He nearly fell into the fire. That's ridiculous. Why push a Marshall? So he's got a £1,000 fine. Very, very lenient in my book. I would have banned him for the weekend and made him go on a self-awareness course. But Alex Rins pushed a Marshall earlier on this year after an accident as well, and Rins immediately apologised and, excuse me, later on in the day, went over and gave the Marshall one of his helmets, which I thought was fantastic.
Classy move over there. And yeah, definitely the Marshalls, of course, they're volunteering their time because they love the sport. Last thing we need to have them be disrespected or, put in the... It's always a dangerous place being a Marshal, but unnecessary move like that to make their weekend a little bit more harder. Another comment in the chat room, like 18 more MotoGP races, easy on everyone. Definitely, I would agree with that. And of course, one rider, I think now he would say he would like a shorter season, but I think early on in his career, he would have said more races for more wins. Marc Marquez, he's on the front row. He is looking forward to get a win, winless this year. Honda, they're winless this year as well, too. But in that same front row, Jorge Martin, winless this year. That team, winless this year. So both teams, both riders, trying to get a win. They'll love to end the season with a win. Enter that offseason on a high note. Which rider do you believe is more likely to get that win, Martin or Marc Marquez?
Mecca was in the box with me for qualifying, and I said Martin's going to push it so hard that he might crash like he did in Malaysia. Marquez around this circuit is going to be another great test for his fatigue. But I did say, wouldn't it be marvelous if Marc Marquez won tomorrow, just to sort of bookend this 3 seasons he's had of misery, injury, no championships or anything like that. So I think everybody is sort of secretly rooting for Marc Marquez tomorrow. Home Grand Prix, of course, in Valencia, with it being Spain. I think it's just going to fit. So I'm really, really, really hopeful that we're going to see a great, great race tomorrow with Marc Marquez at the front and hopefully winning. I think it'll be nice and poetic to round out a couple of seasons and come back fully fitted for next year as well and fully motivated to get another championship under his belt. Another thing I've pointed out as well, and it's just to get my mind actually about tomorrow, is the fact is that when we're going to see the checkered flag tomorrow, we are going to have yet another new world champion. Possible. Well, it's either going to be Baganaia or Quartararo returning, but we are also going to see a little bit of history because it will be the checkered flag in MotoGP. It will be a different checkered flag to what we normally have because they've adopted the same format as Formula One have, whereas fans are going to have their signatures on it. And that's the first time anything's happened to the checkered flag in MotoGP. Just a little useless fact I wanted to share with you there, but they're bringing fans more inclusive with it, and their flag will get cut up, and then you can own it and frame it on your wall, pretty much like how MotoGP have done it. But if you don't want to do that, I suggest just get yourself a couple and just signing them. That's what I've got my flags behind me, and that's pretty much all that is. But I like that idea. A little bit of a useless fact, but everybody in Formula One, as I'm sure you know, Joe, Kobe, and Matthew watching as well, Formula One, they like to moan about anything as well, and when the names came up on the flag, it says, that's going to look ridiculous. Does anybody notice them? No. So it's a great thing that fans get to have that little bit more connectivity to the sport. I believe it's a one-off while they test it, see how many people buy it or not. But I think MotoGP is at the moment more popular than Formula One on the social standings. So I think it's been advertised a little bit too poorly because I think I'm the first one to know about it in terms of saying it because I haven't seen it anywhere apart from a couple of tweets as well. But there you go. A little bit of useless fact I like to leave you people with.
That connectivity, I think, is really great, though. You see in NASCAR fans, they're signing their names, writing messages on the start-finish line. I know my wife and I did that at Southern 500. I got a screenshot of where you could barely see what we wrote during a close finish in stage 2. Makes people excited. And then with F1, so far the biggest controversy I heard about the checker flag this year has to be Tim Cook sort of waving the checker flag at the United States Grand Prix. I don't know what we call that, but that's
You're doing it too.
the biggest controversy. And overall, the connectivity is great because we know passionate fans, they'll be there. The fans, especially the first time, that could really get them hooked on the motorsport. So far, 19 races have been completed. At one point, a 91-point deficit. Now it's a 23-point advantage, so a 112-point swing. We don't know what's going to be the difference at the end of Sunday's race, but we'll be on the air, of course. 7 times the championship has come down to this last race. Last time, 2015, Rossi versus Lorenzo, both of them in Yamahas. What are some of the key moments in this race for viewers to watch? We know the start's going to be a big one, of course. That's where you can make the most ground. Is there other parts of the race where it could be really defining in this championship?
The start is always going to be key, as you say. That's always going to be a breaker. I would say around, it's 27 lap race, isn't it? So around about lap 18, 19 is usually when we see a bit of fatigue. It happened with Rossi, it happened with Dovizioso a couple of years ago with Marquez, and then I think also Marc Marquez had a little moment on one of the starts as well. He just ran it wide, same Grand Prix actually. So fatigue, that's going to be a worry. As I've already said, cold tires, that's going to be something to keep an eye on. Always hold your breath a little bit when they go into turn 4 for the first time on right-handers because if the track temperature is low, then you're going 6 corners on your left before switching to the right. So it's got less temperature in the tire, less temperature on the contact patch as well. So you just sort of slip off. In fact, a great example, I'm going to take my shoe off here as well. I'll give you a little example for you because I've worn these out in the commentary box this year. These are my combox shoes. I like them. So I can run around the commentary box. If you look at the bottom, actually, just at the bottom, you can see more tread. And at the top, there's less tread as well. So imagine that the bottom part of the tread, that is the tire that's constantly touching the left-hand side. It's got loads of rubber on it, loads of grip, all good. Then you imagine the top bit here, less grip, so you slide around more. Now imagine that on a wet surface. You're going to have a lot of grip at your back, but on the front, you're going to be ice skating almost. It's exactly what it's like for a MotoGP bike. You go on a left-hander, you've got more grip. You go on a right-hander at this track, you've got less grip. Asymmetric tires don't do a thing to do it. This morning, we saw about 4 crashes in 3 minutes. It's a really hard thing. So tire temperature is going to be key. Another thing, traffic. You can't overtake at this circuit. It is impossible. You've got to be really creative about where you slip the bike up the inside. You've got to time your move. Otherwise, you're both going to be off the track. So patience is also key in that respect. And also, just because we're in Spain, just because it's November, and just because the sun is blue at the top there, the sky's blue, sun's shining, the clouds can come in incredibly quickly here. We saw it about 2019, I want to say, when they had to red flag the race because the rain just came in after nowhere and they disappeared. It was a lovely sunny day. So the weather is also on the mind. Basically, tomorrow for 45 minutes, just sit there trying to hold your breath because it's going to be insane.
This race is going to be insane. A lot of great points. And of course, MotoGP season finale tomorrow. And of course, later on today, Grid Live wrap up. But Joshua, before we get to your pick of winners, we want to give a shout out to Julia, of course, who's been here on the air most of the time. Happy belated birthday to her, and thank her for all the weekends of MotoGP coverage this weekend. Of course, you as well for MotoGP, and we'll have you more for F1 in the season. Now comes time for the hard question we got to ask everyone. Pick a winner and 2 questions. Who wins the race and who wins the championship? Or is it one person that's going to do both?
No. Marquez will win the race. Bagnaia will win the title. That's it. That's what I'm saying. Marquez will win the race. Bagnaia will win the title. But I'll tell you what, I don't think Bagnaia is going to win it on the track. He's going to win it by being in the pit lane celebrating. That's how I'm going to see it. I can't see him staying on the track for the entire race. I think he'll go down. But I don't think Quartararo is going to have the pace to get up there and stay with the leaders for a victory. So I think Marquez will win and Bagnaia will be champion. Either way, I get a point. And I will let you know NASCAR in a tweet before the race tomorrow with their grand finale coming up at Phoenix. That is this weekend, isn't it? I'm not just making it. It is this weekend. Right. So that's going to be something as well. Very controversial as well, as always. I'm looking forward to watching that one. But yeah, I'll let you know tomorrow in a tweet when I get a chance to take a look at the running orders and be my sort of pit analyst role and just sort of like in a big ball of dip of chance and stick my hand in and see what I can grab out from the bottom of the depth.
Going to be really interesting. Thank you again, as always, Joshua and Kobe. Championship 4, there is no 23-point advantage. It's just first person across the line, they're the champ.
Yeah, Championship Sunday is always pretty exciting. It's the season finale weekend for the NASCAR Cup Series at Phoenix Raceway. The third time the Valley of the Sun has hosted the championship race, and we have a sellout crowd for the second consecutive year. In 2020, the pandemic led to a limited crowd size, and this year's Final Four has 2 past Cup champions. Joey Logano, the oldest member of the Championship 4, looking for his second Cup title. However, Christopher Bell has scored 2 walk-off victories in the playoffs so far when he was in a must-win situation. And coming to Phoenix, you're also in a must-win situation if you want to win the championship. But Ross Chastain, he still has a lot of media attention on him after the Hail Melon at Martinsville. Joe, you've been off the air for like the past week or so. What's your reaction to the Hail Melon, and which driver has the most momentum entering this weekend?
For what Ross Chastain did, that was a spectacular move, and I really liked was the fact that we're not talking about he went in there, wrecked a bunch of cars himself potentially, fights, the kind of attention that we've seen NASCAR have this controversy. What he did was spectacular. It was different, and it has brought a lot of positive attention from outside the motorsports, including international motorsports drivers, F1 drivers, rally drivers, talking about NASCAR for a big, huge, drastic move to get into the next round of the championship. Overall, I thought it's great. When it comes to what happens in the future, I'm a little bit on the fence, no pun intended, on where NASCAR should go. A rule, not a rule. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. But I think what he did with the Hail Melon, I couldn't believe it. I was on a campus tour, and when I saw that, I yelled. I couldn't believe it. And then folks were, what's going on? And then showing it. It's gone viral. This is great for NASCAR. And I think what is really interesting, if you look at like basketball, you have the buzzer beater, the Hail Mary play, or the trick play in the NFL. This is sort of going to live up there with those sports. And I think it's just really exciting that this was done to where at the end, Trackhouse Racing, they went from down and out thinking they're done, it's over, to they see the move, they couldn't believe it. Then the pure joy, they are in the championship 4. That is what sports is about. We love those kind of emotions in motorsports, any sport, and I just thought it was a big win. What goes forward, that's going to be something different. But what a move by Chastain. And I think this has given him some momentum. But I think the most momentum right now has to be with Christopher Bell coming off another win, must-win situation. This is also easily the most ultimate must-win situation for that team because there's a championship on the line. He has Adam Stevens, a very experienced crew chief. I see him being the top dog in this fight. Chastain, we know he's fast here. He got second place here the last time. I think he could have a good, strong run. But my opinion, I'm going with Christopher Bell. I think he's the driver with the most momentum entering this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with that. I think for me personally, the only driver, I'm going to answer who has the least momentum, because I think when you look at Ross Chastain literally riding the wall, riding that momentum, I think he could definitely get it done. Joey Logano has been waiting for this moment for the past 3 weeks, considering he won early in the round of 8, allowed himself and Team Penske to focus on this car coming up for this race tomorrow. Then Christopher Bell just keeps walking it off. But Chase Elliott is a driver who one of the most consistent seasons I think we have seen in terms of the Cup level in a long time, besides Kyle Larson last year, obviously. But I think Chase Elliott had a better regular season this year than he did during his Cup championship year in 2020. But then that momentum just fell off a cliff. It's gone. I don't know what happened. He still made the championship 4, which is quite impressive, being the most consistent driver, having the lowest average finish out of everyone in the sport. But these past 9 races in the playoffs, he's had the 10th best average finish out of the drivers who started the playoffs. So the 16 drivers, he had the 10th best average finish. So for Chase Elliott, I think his the worst. But in terms of to answer who has the best momentum, I really can't, because I think it's a 3-way time. You have Joey Logano, who has the experience here, winning a championship, been here 4 or 5 times every even number year. Joey Logano finds himself here, has been riding that way for the past 3 weeks now. You have Christopher Bell, who keeps walking it off when he needs to do it the most. I believe he did that. I think his Xfinity Series year, where he finished 4th in the championship 4, I believe he won the final 2 cutoff races before finishing 11th. I believe it was I think it would have been Homestead at the time. He would have finished 11th there. But then Ross Chastain obviously gaining the most amount of social media, coming from one of the worst hated drivers in the Cup Series level, to now you can't see anything about NASCAR on Twitter without seeing Ross Chastain's name. And that's got to be awesome for him. I mean, he's had the most up and down season I think you'll ever see in terms of, oh, we love him today. It's why did he do that the next day? And then the next day it's this kid's got potential. Then, yeah, you guys know where I'm going with it. I think it's a 3-way tie. I don't think any specific driver has more momentum than the other, except Chase Elliott has the least amount of momentum heading into this race. But he's done it before, and I think he could do it again too. So really, it comes to Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern, see what's going to happen.
I'm really glad you brought up that point about Chase Elliott, Matthew, trying to win his second championship, and outside of that win at Talladega, a couple of decent results here and there. We really haven't seen the same Chase Elliott from the regular season. I remember entering the playoffs, Chase Elliott seemed like he was, in a season of great parity. He seemed like the driver who had the best chance entering the playoffs, but for some reason, once we got to the postseason, that 9 car, I'm not going to say they fell off a cliff, but it certainly seems like they really peaked early, and still somehow they find themselves in position to go win a championship. And looking at one of the drivers, I feel like that people aren't talking about enough is Joey Logano. Phoenix is a really good track for Joey Logano, been the veteran of the championship 4. I think a lot of people are really underestimating Joey Logano in this championship fight. Obviously, with Christopher Bell getting those 2 walk-off wins, he could get a 3rd walk-off in this play, which would be absolutely incredible. And then you have Ross Chastain, all of the momentum that he has from Martinsville last weekend. Jeff Gluck posted something really funny on Twitter last night about Ross Chastain, how Ross Chastain is used to, moving around freely at the racetrack because a lot of people didn't know who he was. Now everybody knows who Ross Chastain is, so he won't be able to, just slip in the crowd, slip in and out. Yeah, so everybody's gonna know who the watermelon man is. And if it wasn't so late in the season right now, I'd say Ross Chastain might have a shot at potentially dethroning Chase Elliott as NASCAR's most popular driver. Really crazy how Ross went from one of the most disliked drivers to one of the most beloved. After his move last week, it'll be interesting to see what Ross Chastain's popularity is going to look like at the end of the day. But getting back to Chase Elliott, he's the only Hendrick Motorsports driver competing for the Drivers' Championship. If Chase Elliott or any of the Championship 4 drivers have a poor qualifying lap this afternoon, could they be in trouble on Sunday?
I think that's a real tough thing to answer solely because if you look at the past couple years, usually the guys who are in the championship 4 coincidentally have the fastest 4 cars every single race, except I believe it was last year with Martin Truex qualified 12th while everyone else was like up in the top 5. But Truex still finished second. So I don't know if it'd say you are in trouble, especially now, obviously, with stage racing's been around a while. And like you saw with the truck race last night, how certain pit strategies can put you anywhere from 12th. And then Ben Rhodes went from farther back in the pack. I believe he was last out of the championship 4 drivers at that time, took 2 tires instead of 4. And then all of a sudden he was ahead of all of them. So it's going to come down to, I believe, strategy more or less. But if any driver has a poor qualifying lap, you don't want it, obviously, but it doesn't look like it looks like it's going to be 4 of the fastest cars. I think you're going to have 5 really fast cars, and then I guess the other 31, if I'm doing math correctly, are going to be fast, but not as fast. And it's going to be the 5 playoff drivers if you include Kyle Larson being a playoff driver. I think there's definitely scenarios where he can come out and get it done. He's done it literally last year at this very time too. So I wouldn't say trouble, Kobe, but I maybe a little worried because Truex did it from qualified 12th, finished second. So you could qualify 36th here and still get it done. It just all depends on who you are and if the luck's on your side for however many laps the race ends up being.
I would agree. I wouldn't call it trouble either, but definitely worrisome, especially when it comes to Chase Elliott. It seems if he's mid-pack during a playoff race, he just seems to be mid-pack. He's not making that drive towards the front. If he qualifies ahead, we know he's going to be up front. Just a matter of staying on top of the handling of the car, the strategy as you brought it up, and avoiding some of the craziness that could potentially happen. I think this race, we're not going to see so much of long green flag runs, but I anticipate we might get a couple cautions here and there as drivers trying to get out there. We still got a lot of points battles going on for different positions. So I think it could be a disruptive race. So I feel if you're up towards the front, you're in a good spot. In the case of Chase Elliott, I would be concerned if he qualifies outside the top 10, because then I'm going to start wondering, okay, is he going to be stuck in the mid-pack, or will he be able to come up towards the front? Another driver I feel the same way for, too, is Joey Logano. It seems sometimes the Penske drivers, the Ford camps, if they're up towards the front when they start the race, we could anticipate them. Mid-pack, sometimes it just seems to be mid-pack, but that was more earlier in the season. I think Joey Logano, they have to be looking pretty good considering they had so many weeks to prepare for this. But overall, as you mentioned, Matt, these 4 should be in the top 10. Whoever's not, I think, should be worried a little bit about what's going to happen and can they get drive up to the field.
Yeah, Joe. And looking at what happened in yesterday's 50-minute practice session, Ross Chastain was the fastest. And you had Joey Logano 7th fastest, Chase Elliott 10th fastest, and Christopher Bell down in 20th. But the thing that really matters, are the 10-lap averages to see where people are. Chase Elliott had the 4th fastest 10-lap average. Joey Logano was 5th. Ross Chastain at 8th. So, those 3 championship 4 drivers, pretty close together. But the one that really worries me is Christopher Bell. He was 32nd on the speed charts for the fastest 10-lap average. So I think after yesterday's practice session, Adam Stevens at number 20 team, they're going to need to make some big swings with the car. Hopefully they figured out something overnight, try to lay down a good qualifying lap later this afternoon, because looking at Bell's other championship competitors, they're all close together in speed, but Bell, it seems like he's missing a step or two. So it's commissioner to see if that 20 team can get it figured out, because if they can't find any more speed in that car, Bell might be the one driver who could be in trouble on Sunday. And while Chase Elliott's going for a driver's title, Rick Hendrick has another driver racing for championship, that's Kyle Larson going for the owner's title. A perfect storm for Hendrick would be Larson winning the race and Elliott finishing second. A scenario that would see HMS take both titles with Chase Elliott not competing for the owner's title. Traditionally, the eventual drivers' champion needs to win the championship race, but Larson splitting the drivers and owners final four, that could really shake things up. Is this a year where the drivers' champion may not have to win the race, considering the Larson factor? And do you see team orders as an option for Hendrick if Larson's running in second place to Elliott late in the race?
When it comes to this, team orders, we know NASCAR has this 100% rule. The hard part is enforcing it. We could see what happened, something similar to Bristol, where Elliott has to lead, Larson's in second place. He just makes sure if there was another driver in the playoffs gaining on him, make it hard for them to get around Larson. Now, of course, there's always that risk factor of you just get bunted out of the way, or worse, you end up on the wall. It's going to be really interesting to see how Larson's going to handle this, because Larson, he won this race last year, as Matthew said. I anticipate he's going to be a contender to win this race. Last time we were here in Phoenix, he had a mechanical issue. He was done early. If he doesn't have a mechanical issue, which I don't anticipate he will, he's going to be up towards the front. He's going to be a spoiler. He will love to get that championship, the owner's championship, to Rick Hendrick, whether he's ahead or behind Elliott. I think he's going to really control it. The big thing is if he's behind Elliott and you have another playoff driver catching up, that's where I'm going to be really watching to see how Larson handles, especially if it's a Logano. We know what Joey Logano did to William Byron. Could there still be some harder feelings compared to the other rivals out there? Or is this something where Larson doesn't want to be the spoiler and just lets Logano go by? It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Larson in this race.
I agree with that, definitely. I just hope to not have to see Larson and another playoff driver take each other out trying to get into a championship. The fan in me would love to see double burnouts. Don't get me wrong. Like, could you imagine if 200 cars won? That'd be a pretty fun scene to watch. Or if, like, say Chase Elliott wins a championship, but like Joey Logano wins the owner's championship in the 22 for Penske. I don't know how that would work out for the double burnout thing, but to answer the question, I don't know if there's going to be team orders, but as we've seen from drivers more recently, even teammates race each other just as hard as they race non-teammates lately, except I believe ThorSport a couple weeks ago at Homestead. I don't think that was the case. But for the others, yes, I think for the case, like obviously Joe Gibbs Racing in the Xfinity Series, let's not talk about that though. That race is today. That's going to be very interesting. But I think it's Hendrick's perfect scenario today. You got Alex Bowman back, which is great for them. And then you have two guys fighting for two separate championships. A 1-2 finish is something that we have seen from Hendrick numerous times, especially with these two drivers. And I think we could see it again. I don't know how you have to be with these team orders now, because now you got to use code words. Like you might want to say a random fruit, which means slow down. You might want to order something from McDonald's to speed up and pass this guy. So, NASCAR is very inconsistent with calling it. I don't think we see something like controversial, but you never know at the end of the day. I mean, we've seen a lot of stuff lately. But I think just the best case scenario for Hendrick is to get that 1-2 finish no matter which one of those guys is in front. I don't know if there will be a team order, though.
Yeah, it's hard to tell if there will be team orders, and NASCAR is going to be watching that very, very carefully, as we saw at the Charlotte Roval with Cole Custer and Chase Briscoe. NASCAR certainly wants to make sure the teams are abiding by the 100% rule, making sure all teams are trying to the best of their ability, and instead of trying to fix the race results. However, I will say if Kyle Larson is running second. And I'm late in the race, and they need him to get out front so he can take home that owner's championship. I think it would be, if both Hendrick cars are running like on a long run and they're out front multiple seconds ahead, then I think you could potentially see something. But if it's coming down to this championship race, if it's like NASCAR overtime, then everything's out the window. You just have to focus on yourself at that point, because this is racing for a championship. There's a lot on the line, and Joey Logano and Chase Elliott are past Cup champions. They've been in these big situations like this with a championship on the line. However, for Christopher Bell and Ross Chastain, this is their first appearance in the championship four. Joe Gibbs Racing has been in this position before, but not Trackhouse Racing. Which driver is more likely to run into trouble with inexperience of racing for a championship in the final race, Bell or Chastain?
That's a tough one, but I'm going to say Chastain, even though I believe he has some of the most momentum. Because when you look at these guys in their NASCAR careers, you look at Joey Logano, he's won championships in all series. You look at Chase Elliott, he's won championships. You look at Christopher Bell. Not only has he won a truck championship, but he's finished in the top four twice in the Xfinity Series championship. And then you look at Ross Chastain, no championship, but in the 2019 Truck Series, I believe he was second to Matt Crafton, which is a very impressive. Had 3 wins that season. So I'm going to say Chastain with the lack of experience, because this man 2 years ago was Ryan Newman's COVID replacement driver, driving part-time for Spire Motorsports. Now 2 years later, he is probably one of the favorites for the NASCAR Cup Series championship. So I guess that inexperience it shows just by that statement, just by that 10-second statement that just came out of my mouth, shows how far he has come in such a little bit of time with Trackhouse Racing. So I think Bell's probably more worried at this current second, even though he's, like I said multiple times on this show, Bell got that dog in him too when it comes to winning when he needs to win. But his experience in the Cup Series playoff, I believe he only made the round of 12, I think was his best. Now he's fighting for a championship. But Ross Chastain, I don't believe, has ever made the playoffs. So for him to do that with Chip Ganassi, had a great, very consistent year coming over to Trackhouse, and now all of a sudden he's in the Final Four. I think that's going to be the most worry. I think he's probably more likely to run into trouble with the inexperience, because he's only been in this situation one time in the Truck Series, compared to Bell, compared to Logano, compared to, oh my gosh, Chase Elliott. I drew a blank there. So yeah, I'm going to go with Chastain on that one, but I feel like you could really go either way here.
I would have to agree. I feel Chastain's the driver that has the least amount of experience and is going to, I think, potentially stumble, just because for the crew chief, for everyone, Trackhouse, they could end up putting too much pressure on themselves. If they were smart about approaching this weekend, big goal, just go out there, do what you've done. You've been fast all year long. You could put yourself easily in contention to win this race and get a good finish. Christopher Bell, with those wins, with Adam Stevens on the crew chief, and you got championship caliber teammate with Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, who's been so close so many times, and of course, Martin Truex Jr. He's in a really good spot where they're all just pumping him up, getting that team hyped up, ready for this race weekend. I think that's the big advantage compared to Trackhouse, where, Gluck said in the very beginning of the season, he thought this was going to be the big disappointment of the year, was Trackhouse Racing. That tweet has poorly aged, and overall, I think the Cinderella story might come to a little bit of an early end for Trackhouse, just because the pressure is going to be huge. It's going to be really interesting. Can they handle it?
Yeah. And the difference is, as I said, Joe Gibbs Racing, they've been in the position, of being in this championship for going for a championship, but not the driver. But on the other hand, Trackhouse hasn't been in this position, and Ross Chastain hasn't been in this position. I think there's a difference between an organization that's used to being in this place and one driver, rather than both parties not being in this position. Do I think Trackhouse and Ross Chastain can rise to the occasion? I think they can, but Joe Gibbs Racing, they have the experience. I think experience could certainly play a factor, but Trackhouse shows us, and Ross Chastain showed that they're willing to do anything. So I would not be surprised if the driver of the number one Chevrolet is holding up the championship trophy at the end of the day. And thinking back to the last question while you guys were answering, I was actually doing some real deep thinking, and actually, if Kyle Larson is running second to Chase Elliott, late in the race. Team order is actually not going to really matter, since one is in the owners championship and the other is not. So there would be really no need for team orders there. I think I was just overthinking that a little bit. And as I mentioned all week long, people have been talking about the Hail Melon. Some drivers like Joey Logano and others want to see a rule to prevent that from happening again. We reached out to our iRacing friends at Radius Racing, Cameron Caldwell and Alonso Chicano to see if the Hail Melon could work at Phoenix. So take a look. Yeah, so Cameron Caldwell said this works at Martinsville, Richmond, and Phoenix. However, unlike Martinsville, where you gain a ton of time, you only pick up one position if done correctly, and it's not a huge advantage. Last lap, if a playoff driver is leading in second place, is a playoff driver, does that driver in second go for the wall?
I think it depends on who's the driver. If it's Ross Chastain, he might try it. Most likely, probably will. Compared to Joey Logano, Logano has said he's thought about trying that move in Martinsville, but never been in a situation where he had to. He might. I don't know about Christopher Bell, but the other thing too, as you saw in that video, is not a huge advantage where you're gaining 5 positions. You gain one, and that driver on the inside, I bet as soon as the spotter tells him that person's right in the wall, they're going to change how they're driving that corner. It's going to be a really tricky move to see it work, but it could potentially. I just don't think the chances are high we're going to see someone try it this weekend. Maybe Logano if they're in second place, maybe Chastain if they're in second place, but if there's other playoff drivers right behind him, maybe not.
I mean, I'm gonna like quote kind of our very own Ben Schneider and say, I just hope we don't see this ever again. I mean, I think it's one of the greatest moments we've ever seen in NASCAR, but I just hope someone doesn't ride the wall. I think we saw in the truck race last night, or technically this morning too, if you're on the East Coast, that it didn't need to be done, and I feel like it takes away from the hard battling. I mean, Phoenix is such a large track. I mean, I was watching the race with my grandmother last night, and the amount that you could just dive down, like, why would you need the wall when you could just cut most of the course off and then come back in? I don't think we will see it. And like I mean, I'm in a online racing league tonight. We're racing at Phoenix. I might try it because I am so bad anyway. So I'll keep you guys updated with Grid Network how that goes for me. I'm gonna try it because I'm gonna be in last anyway. But I don't think we're going to see it. I think the perfect scenario for NASCAR would be a green-white checkered NASCAR overtime, is what we call it now, between the final four, running 1, 2, 3, 4, and Larson in fifth. I think that's their best case scenario, but I do not believe I see someone doing that. But if we're gonna talk like we do, I think it could be either. I think Logano probably. They said I don't know who they interviewed. Said in 2018 they ran it in the simulator. I don't know if you guys saw that, but it was somebody with Joey Logano, former member of Joey Logano's team, something along those lines. I know that's exactly what they said. I couldn't tell you exactly who it is, but they said Joey Logano practiced it in 2018 if he needed to get it done. So it'd either be Chastain or, I think honestly, we saw Larson do it at Darlington. I think all you have to do is go high and you block it very easily, especially at Phoenix, because you can't get off the wall very easily unless you want to dip down across the track like they do heading into turn one. So to answer that very short question, a very long answer, I don't think we see it. I don't know if we see it ever again unless you're playing video games.
Yeah, I think the Hail Melon is gonna be a thing that's just one and done. It was great while it happened, and let's appreciate the effect that it had on the sport. I know on last Sunday's show we were all extremely skeptical of it. I mean we still thought it was really cool. Just out a couple hours after it happened, but at the same time we were afraid it was gonna make NASCAR look bad and question the legitimacy of the sport to an outside audience. But it actually had the opposite effect of what we thought. Being mostly positive, which is really great. But that's not something we want to see all the time. And we even touched on it on Monday, the day afterwards. One full day to digest everything that was going on, and said, like, yeah, while that was a clever move by Ross Chastain, next year when we come to Martinsville for the cutoff race, we don't want to see the driver who's in first leading, thinking there's a car in second is going to ride the wall, and then we have the car in second thinking, I'm going to try to Hail Mel, and then we see like we see like the car in first and second, in the wall coming out 3 and 4, and then we see the driver who's close behind in third during the overtime restart, on the bottom trying to pull off a slide job at Martinsville, and then we get a whole bunch of ridiculous chaos and nonsense. So I think the Hail Melon is going to only be a one-time occurrence.
I can definitely agree with that. But now it's time for our favorite game. Wrapping up, I guess, for the NASCAR side of things today. We are doing some pick a winner today. So very excited to host this one. So we're going to start with what we talked about most recently, and that is NASCAR, both the race and championship. So we're going to start with you, Joe, here, who you guys are battling for the lead, you two. I'm just chilling in either 9th or 8th right now. Who do you think's going to win the race, and who do you think's going to win the championship? Is it the same person, or is it different?
I think it's going to be the same person again, and I'm going to go with Christopher Bell and the number 20. I think Adam Stevens is going to coach him through this race. I think he's going to run a smart race all race long. There's no reason why he can't get it done. He has the confidence. I think this is going to be the crowning of another Joe Gibbs champion. And first time in the 20 car. That's, of course, Tony Stewart. I think he's really going to set himself up as a driver to watch for 2023 and beyond. Christopher Bell is my pick.
I'm gonna go different with both. I think Kyle Larson's gonna win the race and take home the owners championship. And we're gonna see a split owners and drivers champion. And as for the championship itself, I think the inexperience won't be a factor. He ran very well here in the spring. I think Trackhouse Ross Chastain is gonna be NASCAR Cup Series champion.
And for my pick a winner for NASCAR, this is the one sport that I watched that I don't believe I have gotten right this season. I think it's going to be the same person. My answer was going to look a lot like Kobe's, but I think that Ross Chastain just simply has got that dog in him, got that momentum, got those watermelons. He's ready to go. And I think Chastain could see one of the best Cinderella stories we have seen in NASCAR in the most recent years. And our very own Adam Limmery's Chase Elliott for the win and championship. I think for me, if you look at my super late NASCAR, I projected Chase Elliott very early on in the year, but I don't know how I can keep that with that momentum. But Chase Elliott likes to prove everyone wrong, so let's see what happens. We all got different picks here for each one, which I really appreciate. But now we're gonna go over to MotoGP with another very fascinating battle here. Who's going to win the race and who's going to win the championship? Same person, different?
I think it's going to be different. I anticipate Marc Marquez is going to pull off the win. Jorge Martin, he just pushes himself too hard at times. We know he's fast. He just can't finish the races. I'm afraid that's going to cost him. Or Marc Marquez, with his incredible experience, is just going to get around him, get the win for himself and for Honda. Then for the championship, I anticipate Pecco Baganaia. He knows he just has to finish and score more than 2 points, 14th or better. He hasn't made. He's going to run a solid race in the top 10, not push it hard. He'll love to get closer to the front, get the win, but I don't see him winning it. I see him getting it all. Pecco Baganaia, the champion.
I'm keeping it different again for the race and the champion. I think Jack Miller's gonna get it done. Champion easy. I think Pecco Bagnaia for Fabio Quartararo is just gonna be. I think he needs too many things to go perfect in order for this to be a good day for him. He's on a bike that's really struggling right now, and he basically needs to go out there, win the race and need Pecco to have the worst luck ever. So I think Fabio has too much going on. I think Pecco has an easy route to become MotoGP World Champion.
And in order to jump Mr. Josh Plays on Twitter, I'm going to have a little fun with this one. I think Fabio Quartararo gets it done. I think he wins the race. But I think Pecco Bagnaia wins the championship by getting just enough points. So that's how I feel about this one. Do I know a lot about MotoGP? Absolutely not. So you never know. These are my lucky picks, guys. As Formula One, MotoGP, definitely not NASCAR. So I'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. And one of the things Want to shout out to Brandon, who's on Grid Encore usually. Last race weekend, he was outside the top 10, got the 5 bonus points. He could still get in the top 10. So for anybody outside the top 10 or hasn't played, play, because we still have Formula One later in the season and more racing with World Rally Championship and Supercars. We, though, for today are out of time, though. So I encourage everyone, be sure visit the link to our Patreon. Big thank you to Colin, Show, Mark, and Robin for investing in us. You can invest in us through Patreon or buy me a coffee, which Amber and Zach have done. A big thank you to them and for everyone following the Grid Network. Be sure to follow us on all our social media platforms, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn even, where we have positions available. Definitely encourage everyone to check it out. And if you want to invest in the stock market, public.com, use the referral code GRIDnet. You get free stock. Get started investing in the stock market. They have tools to learn about investing in the stock market, daily podcasts. You can find your current friends, make new friends, make new connections, public.com, and the referral code GRIDnet. So overall, we're definitely excited for this championship race weekend, and we encourage everyone to subscribe and like to us right here on YouTube, or if you're watching us on Facebook, as Kathy Dunn is watching. Thank you, Kathy, so much for that. We always enjoy being on the air, and we definitely encourage everyone follow us and enjoy the races. We're Kobe Lambeth at the podium finish, and Matthew Bro, I'm Joe San Diego. Thank you so much. Enjoy the races, and be sure to comment who's going to win the race and the championship. Don't be an anonymous investor. Join the stock market social media platform, public.com. Invest any amount of money and share with friends and new friends. Discover new opportunities, such as new companies and potential business partners, and useful tools for beginners, and share your experience with friends on public.com. Link in the video description gets you $5 for being a Grid Network viewer. Use the referral code GRIDnet for your free $5 to invest. Start investing and networking on public.com.